My name is Glenn Bell, and I'm a senior technical consultant here at NSA. I'd like to thank you for joining us for NSA's 79th Professional Services webinar titled Why Leading Distributors on Infor CSD Are Turning to AI-Powered AP Automation. Today, we'll be covering several key points across three topics. If you'd go ahead and just advance the slide. And those three topics are the modern distribution of finance challenge, how distributors use Medius as the control layer over Infor, and intelligent automation in action. We'll also have Q&A near the end of our presentation where you'll have the opportunity to enter your questions in chat. We do have a promotional offer today from Medius that's valued at $15,000 for a complimentary business impact assessment. That high value direct consulting offer will enhance your business, I'm sure, and is a great offer. And we'll get into the details on that just following the Q&A. So again, I'm Glenn Bell. My contact information is on screen, and we have a little slide swap there. It looks like my name is Glenn Bell, but in any case, I'll be available for contact. I'll drop my my contact information into chat here as well. And then I'll also turn this over to Don Holm from Medius in a few minutes. But before we get rolling with that, I would like to tell you just a little bit about NSA. So if you could advance to that. At NSA, we've been working in the distribution space since 1984, and we were the first Infor reseller dedicated to this market. Our consulting team is made up of full-time specialists with deep SXE and Cloud Suite experience, many with over 20 years in distribution. Our focus is helping distributors get more from their ERP, whether that's through optimization, integrations, or ongoing improvement through our NSA Plus services. You can review our NSA Plus services at nsacom.com. To be clear, distribution is what we do, and we're proud to have built one of the most experienced teams in the space. With that, I'm pleased to introduce today's presenter, Don Holm, Global Vice President of Value Consulting at Medius. Don brings more than 25 years of experience helping distributors and manufacturers modernize accounts payable, digitize supply chains, and improve working capital. At Medius, he leads the global solutions and value consulting organization, partnering with customers to realize the full business impact of AP automation, from process efficiency and cost control to improved supplier relationships and cash flow performance. Don, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you, Glenn. Thanks, everyone, for the attendance, and thank you for that introduction. So as mentioned, my name's Don Holm. I lead what's called the Solutions and Value Consulting organization at Medius. I've been with Medius for about 3 years. Prior to that time, I've spent like the last 13 years focused on procurement, digital supply chain, helping distributors like yourself optimize kind of internal business processes. So I'm here to share some insights and wisdom. A little bit about Medius. So Medius is an AP automation solution provider. So for those that don't necessarily live and breathe inside of accounts payable, AP is the business process that arguably your suppliers care most about its performance, because your ability to process invoices quickly and efficiently means that your suppliers get paid on time and view you as a more favorable customer. I would say Medius is trusted by Infor distribution and manufacturing clients. NSA, in fact, has a pre-manufactured kind of connector that can help you plug in Infor very quickly and start leveraging Medius very quickly. So we're the only AP automation solution published on the Infor marketplace. So it's a fabulous opportunity to deploy some really solid technology that delivers results quickly with low risk. In partnership with NSA Com, Infor's Partner of the Year distribution, we enhance essentially, again, AP process efficiency, tax handling, and industry-specific use cases that are going to help bring value to your business. We have a huge client base. dozens of customers in the distribution space, of which I'll share some stories today later on. But we do have an entire suite, which we'll get into as well. But without further ado, let's get into the bulk of the remarks. So in terms of the AP process, we conducted some research in conjunction with a company called Ardent Partners, who specialize in kind of accounts payable, trends, research, and things of that nature. And the AP process in general, when you talk to finance professionals, this is kind of the rank order of some of the business challenges. So one is approvals take too long, and approvals can be one or two things in this scenario. One is, reconciling when there's, say, a match exception inside AP. So where you have an invoice that maybe it fails to match the purchase order, or they're waiting on a goods receipt, driving reconciliation, and that can take too long, as well as, driving, say, non-PO type approval and routing workflow. That can take very long as well. The high percentage of exceptions, I think, is tightly correlated with that first one. And I think this is definitely true in distribution. One of the things, and I'll cover this in a subsequent slide, but distribution is characterized by high transaction volumes in AP and a large number of exceptions. And without technology, most organizations kind of brute force they throw people at the problem, and it's typically suboptimal. This third one here, fraud risk, this is increasingly becoming more important to finance pros, especially in this world of artificial intelligence. We've seen, in fact, we have a customer that uses a technology inside of Medius called fraud and risk detection. The number of fake invoices that get attempted and thrown into an AP process is increasingly on the rise. And so, again, if you don't live in AP, you don't realize, but they're constantly being bombarded with requests to get paid. So fraud is definitely a thing. Late supplier payments, of course, again, AP performance dictates how satisfied suppliers are. Of course, process transparency, visibility, analytics are all key. And then, again, people are using people to manage this process today. So a lot of complexity in AP. But in terms of distributor specific challenges, I'm going to start kind of in the upper right. I mentioned this up top. Distributors, given the sheer number of suppliers, the large number of SKUs, the nature of deliveries, the nature of warehousing, the nature of, say, drop shipments, typically significantly higher than average invoice volumes with a lot of supplier diversity. So when you think about supplier diversity, again, from an AP perspective, the invoices you get are all variable in terms of their structure, what they look like. The lines are all structured differently. And so AP is an inherently complex process without technology. Freight credits and price variance. So when you think about when there are exceptions, how do you drive and adjust and adjudicate these invoice transactions and do so in an efficient way, and then essentially spread those costs back in an appropriate way from an accounting perspective? Very complex. Multi-PO and complex matching. So again, one of the unique problems in the world of distribution is you might have an invoice that's referencing multiple different purchase orders. So suppliers are fulfilling against multiple different orders. They're sending this aggregated bill, and it can be very complicated to take, say, invoice line 7, which is referencing a different PO than, say, invoice line 4. So there's a lot of complexity there as well. Exception management overload. Again, given the volume, given the nature of the exceptions, you have this huge volume of work that requires people to shepherd and manage through the business process. And again, all the while, your vendors, these invoices from their perspective are in a black hole. They don't know if they're going to get paid. And your performance in this regard has a direct impact to their satisfaction with you and their ability to get paid on time. Cash flow and discount capture pressure. For those companies that pursue early pay discounts as a means to increase margin, having a business process that performs consistently fast allows you to yield all the early pay discounts that you are entitled to. So that's very important. And then I think the other thing, growth through acquisition. So as you think about, I think distributor companies in general, there's a lot of sort of acquisition activity. So new entities, ERPs, supplier records, just exacerbate this complexity. One of the advantages I would say with Medius in particular is how quickly you can fold in that transactional activity without necessarily migrating the ERP, on day one. So there's some advantages there from a synergy perspective. Another, challenge, margin blind spots across branches and lines of business. So I mentioned this a bit, freight and handling costs not consistently applied to SKUs or branches. Rebates and supplier credits might be hitting late, distorting your margins. Manual allocation of landed cost or inventory adjustments. So you think about, again, if you have a variation between an invoice line and the expected value, it can be difficult without automation to allocate, the variances across, the inventory in an appropriate way from an accounting perspective. Okay. I talked a little bit about this earlier, but, payables is a foundational, and I would argue a strategic business process from your vendor's perspective. And so no matter where you stand on the working capital, spectrum, whether you're, hey, we want to preserve cash and stretch payment terms out as long as possible with vendors, or whether, you say, hey, we want to drive more vendors to early pay discount terms, you could, fall in your payment plan. The research indicates this is how companies typically fall out in terms of how they think about paying bills and when they pay those bills. But I'd say the key thing to take away from this is how well your AP process performs has a direct impact on your ability to pay suppliers on time and also to be strategic from a working capital perspective. So again, whether it be to optimize your early pay discount capture rates, or even say stretch payment terms to, hold on to cash longer, having a solution that's focused on AP automation is certainly advantageous from both of those perspectives. Okay, so as you think about this opportunity of AP automation, and I'm going to go backwards a bit in time because, this whole space probably started in maybe the 80s with the advent of optical character recognition technology, where, this technology was able to read and extract characters from documents that, like an invoice, as an example. And that's pretty much been the norm up until probably about, 2000, 2005, when a bunch of companies started to tap into kind of this idea of internet-based, EDI, think, business networks and getting data in from suppliers electronically. The problem with that approach is, asking suppliers to change behavior when they have an ERP system that already naturally sends out PDF invoice documents is very difficult. It's very difficult to make suppliers adopt and change how they send an invoice. And so you fast forward to today with the advent of, cloud computing, artificial intelligence, there's this convergence. And, a platform like Medius overcomes a lot of the challenges you see here, where you have highly complex invoices with complex lines that are referencing multiple orders. You need a platform that has the ability to read both the header and the line level detail accurately, and then more importantly, connect those invoice lines accurately to the different purchase order lines, and then tee up only the exceptions so that a business user can, efficiently resolve that exception. Another aspect of where generic automation might fail is just struggling with credits, returns, core exchanges, if you're doing, collaboration back and forth with returns and things of that nature. So the Medius platform, it certainly recognizes there's a lot of intelligence baked into the platform in terms of recognizing different transaction types like credits, things like that, streamlines the process, frees up time to focus on, key strategic work. And then, platforms generally need to be able to support multiple ERP systems and adapt quickly to changing requirements, especially as you think about mergers and acquisitions and acquiring new entities. Okay. The nuts and bolts. So what are we talking about from a solution perspective? So the title of this slide is How Distributors Use Medius as the Control Layer over Infor. And that's a key point. And what we're talking about is complementing Infor with a cloud-based solution that is purpose-built to solve the accounts payable challenge very efficiently, and then natively connect into Infor in a way that's super fast, pre-built and tested so that you can get value right away. Very, very important. So starting on the left-hand side, one of the core tenets of the Medius solution is invoice ingestion. So the Medius platform is able to consume invoices no matter how they are arriving to your accounts payable process today. So you might have vendors that are sending EDI transactions. No problem. We can consume those into the Medius platform. Probably the most common way invoices get into organizations today is through a PDF document that's been emailed or an image document that's been emailed. So inside of the Medius platform, and it's kind of starting with the left, this AI-driven touchless data extraction. There's a technology in Medius called Medius Capture, which uses machine learning, and it's contextual based, meaning it's seen almost every variety of an invoice imaginable, and it's seen almost every variation of how a user has corrected maybe the first pass of Medius's attempt to extract the right data. And so essentially it's getting smarter over time. So that's a very important point. Why that intelligence over time is beneficial to you is you come on as a new customer, the first pass accuracy in terms of its ability to understand the header level details and accurately extract those line level details across those complex invoices, very, very accurate. So it learns very quickly. From there, the invoices flow into purpose-built workflows based on whether they're based on a PO or a non-PO. And the bread and butter, I would say, of Medius is kind of in this lower swim lane here, the automated 3- and 2-way matching. So one of the metrics we'll talk about in a bit that we measure inside of the platform at the customer level as well as an aggregate is the concept of touchless processing. And this is a touchless invoice essentially is infinitely productive from a people perspective and a process perspective. So Medius will accurately match those invoices to the control documents, like an order and a goods receipt. It tees up only the exceptions for the right business user to review. So if you have a price exception or a quantity exception, or maybe you're waiting on a goods receipt, all those things get teed up in a really clean way. And then they get resolved very quickly, and then they flow right into Infor. From a non-PO perspective, kind of the top swim lane, a non-PO invoice comes in, could be like a utility bill, like a recurring invoice, and those can be set up automatically. It could be just a non-PO invoice for services that no one took the time to fill out a service order in Infor. Medius has what's called predictive coding and routing. So it's also learning over time how these non-PO invoices need to be coded and who they need to route to for approval. And so all of that is done inside the platform. It's mobile enabled. So essentially a user can use their mobile device to approve the invoice transactions. There's also an inline email-based approval where they can review the contents of the invoice in the email and simply click the approve right from there. And then again, so once everything's approved through the right hierarchy, it flows right into Infor, ready for payment. We do have a payments module as well. So if you wanted to do batch payment scheduling inside of Medius, we have a whole check print outsourcing function that we leverage. We connect to your dispersing bank to batch up and essentially send your payments, your positive pays, to ultimately your dispersing bank if you wanted to leverage that as well. The key is we're complementing Infor. In addition, right? So that's the core, and that's kind of the centerpiece of the Medius platform, this AI-driven AP and payment automation. That's kind of the basis of what we do. The advantage of that strategy is it works, again, for distributors, all of your MRP generated orders, your automated demand, it just seamlessly processes all of those invoice transactions, 100% invoice coverage inside of Medius. We wrap our AP automation layer with a couple of key technologies. One is Medius Copilot, which is we are an Azure shop. And so we have essentially embedded inside of the Medius platform OpenAI. So when it, say, a user is making an approval decision or needs to understand more about the task that's been assigned to them, Copilot will analyze the transaction, say, relative to other invoices from that supplier. It'll bubble up important variances or differences so that a user has kind of a full kind of AI-based view of what they're approving and what maybe they should approve. If you operate, have invoices in a foreign language, maybe you have vendors that send invoices in Spanish, it'll also conduct translation automatically. Supplier conversations is an agentic solution. It's actually several different agents blended into one, because when you think about vendors, especially from an AP perspective, they oftentimes send you inquiries into invoice or payment status. When am I going to get paid? What's the status of this invoice? Here's this invoice. Where is it? All this stuff. Here's a statement. Here's all my invoices I have outstanding with you. And a lot of times there's noise, just general correspondence. Supplier conversations is a solution that parses through all that noise. One of the things we've observed is like 43% of inquiries into AP require no response. But, if you're like most companies, you're weeding through that with people. So it recognizes that. It'll autonomously respond to vendors for questions that are in its domain. So invoice or payment status, looks that up, sends that off right away. Hey, here's the status of your invoice payment. Looking ready to go. Everything's great. But it'll also escalate. So if things are more difficult or out of band, supplier needs extra service. Maybe they're wanting to change something in their profile, it's smart enough to eliminate risk and escalate to the right people internally for things that might need human attention. And then, of course, if you do get a statement in, one of the great benefits is Conversations works in tandem with another agentic solution called statement reconciliation, which will parse through the statement and then tee up essentially key gaps between invoices you have a record for and then invoices that you don't have maybe on file, or variances between what the supplier is expecting you to pay versus what you're going to pay. So does a good job of that. And then fraud and risk detection. Again, this world of AI where you have suppliers constantly bombarding finance organizations with inbounds to get paid, fake invoices. It's going to scrub out all that and make those visible inside of the business process. The connect layer, that's the gray layer. This is arguably the most important part of Medius, and that's the ability to complement and connect to Infor seamlessly. So as we discussed, NSA has a connector that they've already built that you can leverage. It means you can get up and running quickly. We wrap this entire AP platform with another series of modules: supplier onboarding, procurement. You can think of that more as kind of like indirect procurement, so catalog buying, things like that. There's strategic sourcing embedded, there's contract management, as well as expense management for things like travel and expense reimbursement. So all of these things are inclusive. Supplier onboarding, I would say, is relevant, especially in the world of distributors, as you think maybe about expanding sources of supply, maybe onboarding new SKUs, having suppliers, giving them a single place to maintain on a periodic basis the list of SKUs that they have that are available to sell. You could leverage supplier onboarding forms that will automatically ping suppliers, say every 6 months or every year, hey, please upload the latest set of SKUs that are available for us to buy. I'm sure you've all probably solved for that though already. OTC Industrial Technologies is a customer of ours running Infor, and it's a great quote from Jimmy Lamb, who's the Director of Supply Chain and Logistics. So going live with Medius marks a big step forward in our automation journey. The integration with Infor CSD, supported through our partnership with NSA, gives us greater visibility, control, and confidence in every step of the AP process. We're excited to see the efficiency gains and time savings this will unlock across our operations. It's a great quote. And the other thing I will say about this, and OTC is such a well-run company, they pride themselves, I think, on their people, their agility, and I think their endorsement and selection of Medius is a great testament to the offering. I'll quickly go through a series of slides that have pictures of some of the things I've already talked about. But touchless processing built for complexity. So on the screen on the right is an example of an invoice that has, a bunch of different lines. The structure's funky. You got multiple POs being referenced in those lines. And then on the right is the screen where we just tee up just the exceptions for someone to review and look at. It's a very powerful idea of how we drive, efficiency to what's currently a very complex process. And so one distributor we have in our customer base with about 50,000 SKUs automates 92% of line matches across multi-PO invoices using Medius, which is a pretty astounding statistic when you think about the comparison between a people-centric process. Predictive coding and routing. So this is an example of kind of seeing these little green. This is a non-PO invoice transaction where Medius is showing the different accounting fields as well as the approver with a high level of confidence, where we've predictively coded and routed a transaction, a non-PO transaction. So again, as we see more and more non-PO transactions from a supplier, as they get coded, it starts to learn. It's almost as though the machine is looking over the shoulder of the people doing that work. And, it creates a highly touchless and automated process from an AP perspective on the non-POs. One of the stats we talk about, it hits about 95% precision after 2 invoices, of course, assuming they're coded, similarly. So a great innovation. Straight through payments. I mentioned this a bit. Most companies run their batch payments out of Infor, and that's fine. You can continue to do so. Medius has a payments module, and it will consume. You can essentially send your entire batch into Medius, and we can conduct payments, or you can just keep your payment process as is. But we also have this concept of straight through payments because we have all the invoices in our platform. We can automate the batching and scheduling of those payments. And again, because we both interface with your bank and we have our own check print outsourcing process, it's a full one-stop shop for payment issuance. One of the advantages I would say is you have, I think, more batch processing flexibility. So if you do have aspirations to maybe improve working capital, maybe stretch payment terms, or maybe hold on to some money longer, you got some options to do that inside of Medius. And it will also flag transactions that are inherently risky. So great example is if the master data for a supplier has changed since the last time you issued a payment to them. So maybe their bank account changed or their address changed or where you're sending that transaction. It recognizes that and it will tee those up graphically and stop that payment before it gets issued. It's a very powerful capability there. Talked a little bit about this concept of supplier conversations. So this is just bringing some numbers to this. Most companies on average, about 28 emails per day from suppliers about, inquiries, other correspondence. This can take up to 6 hours a week to weed through all of that detail. And so what Supplier Conversations does, it's just always working 24/7. It's filtering out all the noise, but it answers questions it can in real time, and it copies relevant employees on key exchanges that humans need to be paying attention to. And it, of course, escalates anything that's challenging, out of bounds, or risky, like say, hey, we need to update our payment details. It won't do those sorts of things. Samuelson and Company is another great company. I'd say culturally probably similar to OTC Industrial. They're very agile, innovative, and what a great set of results they've seen in leveraging supplier conversations as part of their AP automation. So their invoice inbox volume dropped dramatically. So they basically were spending multiple hours to under 30 minutes a day managing this inbox with inquiries. And it addresses, by the way, internal inquiries. So if you've got internal employees making inquiries to AP, it does those too. Timeliness and response dramatically improved. Inbox clutter, again, filtering out all the noise. But I think the interesting byproduct here is the AP morale. And I think this connects to the broader, just Medius project in general, which is, when you have this great piece of technology, the team feels more supported, they get more engaged. It's kind of exciting. It's kind of making AP fun again, I would say. So it's kind of interesting little byproduct. In the moment guidance, I talked a little bit about Copilot. It's a good little example. The example on the right is, giving insights to approvers on, what kind of approval decision, what are they looking at, some context in the screen. If you look carefully, there's a little green check mark. So it's going to automatically tee up, for example, the history for a given supplier and what the approval outcome was. And also, of course, recognize price variances. So if there's something out of whack from a pricing perspective, it's going to bubble up and make people aware of that. So, hey, this invoice is significantly higher. Did you know you're paying a lot more for this item now than maybe you were before? So pretty strategic to have that sort of AI-based oversight looking at transactions as people are making approval decisions. Talked about fraud and risk detection. The screen on the right is an example of invoice transactions that are in the business process that have one or more risk factors tied to them. So this one is, maybe a spoofing attempt from a fake supplier, faking themselves out, maybe as a real one. But the key point here is we're taking risks that are pretty much unknown to a business today, and we're bubbling them up, making them front and center in the business process. The other thing we've introduced is this concept of randomized extra approvals, because sometimes fraud is the result of internal collusion with an external party. And, there's some control risk some organizations might have. So the idea of a randomized extra approval would thwart maybe potential bad internal actors from behaving in an inappropriate way. I talked a little bit about straight-through processing. Medius customers are highly satisfied. The NPS scores are off the charts, but essentially the takeaway here is we're twice as good as everyone else from the metric that matters, which is touchless invoice processing. Our best-in-class customers have a touchless rate of just short of 95%, meaning invoice comes in, gets connected, matched, reconciled, posted to Infor without ever requiring a human touch. It's a pretty remarkable statistic. So it really creates this true managed by exception process. And then the other aspect to this is cycle time compression, the ability for the AP process to perform consistently fast. So best in class approval for a Medius customer is 1 day. The average is about 6.3 days. Industry benchmark is about 3 days for approval, with 13.5 being on average. So just the concept cycle time compression means two things. One, more on-time payments. I'd say another, it creates an opportunity to maybe engage suppliers in the early pay discount discussion. If you're able to prove through data and analytics that you have a process that consistently gets invoices ready to pay and they believe you, they're more likely to sign up. Hey, we'll give you 1% if you pay us within 10 days, or 1.5% or 2. Maybe not, it depends on the margin and whatnot, but there's certainly a conversation there to be had. Iconic's Waterworks, work-life balance is important. People are just happier when they finish their work at the end of the day and go home satisfied. And it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. It's such a great investment in your people. And that brings us time for questions.
Well, thank you, Don. Thank you for that tremendous presentation. At this time, I'd like to open the floor for questions in chat. So please do go ahead and enter any questions you may have. While we're waiting on some of that, I think let's advance to your offering slide, and we'll just keep that up while we go through questions.
Right.
Just give it a minute. Okay. From your experience working with distributors, what are the biggest pain points you see when it comes to invoice processing and approvals inside Infor CSD?
Inside of Infor CSD.
Yeah.
Yeah. So well, I think there's probably two. So, and I kind of mentioned this, it's the volume, right? So it's the volume, and you think about, you have the volume, and what does it take to address that volume? So one, it's people intensive. So you get an invoice in, you have to open it, you have to essentially key enter it. And at that point, there may be an exception that gets thrown inside of Infor M3. And so, Infor M3 has to kick off a series of rules to engage people to address and resolve the exception. And I think all of that is just people intensive, and it's not necessarily purpose built from an AP usability or an invoice reconciliation perspective. So I think that's probably it. It's the volume of exceptions and the sheer amount of human work that's required to address, I would say.
Well, great. Thank you. Do you support processing invoices in foreign languages, Spanish, Polish, Romanian, etc.?
Yes. Yeah. It's essentially unlimited. I don't think there's not a language I'm aware of that we do not support.
Fantastic.
Yep.
Another one here is the batch payment connected to business bank. Is it offered in Canada?
Connected to business bank, yes. So is business bank the name of the bank in Canada?
That's a good follow-up. I don't know that.
Yeah. Net is, we're bank agnostic. And so, yeah, at the end of the day, I'm not aware of a bank that has limitations from our ability to connect to it, I would say. So we operate, across the globe, Canada, United States, Europe. We have Australian entities. Yep. So I'd say
Great.
the answer to that is we complement and connect. Yep.
Great.
So I'll let Stuart know to set up the Zoom. Yeah.
Okay. If you could, people could please just mute themselves, and we'll take our questions in chat. Thank you. We do have another one here, which is, why is now the right time for distributors to take a fresh look at automating AP?
A lot of reasons. I tell my kids this, and again, going back to the two companies I talked about, culturally, like they're agile, they're innovators. Number one is the connectivity to Infor is essentially now pre-built and authorized by NSA. So that whole risk of connecting your ERP is essentially eliminated. So there's a huge time to value component. And then the other aspect is Medius delivers. I've been in the software space for 25 years. I haven't seen a piece of commercial software that plugs in and starts doing the work that you expect it to do as quickly and as effectively as Medius does. So it's low risk from that standpoint. Again, as I mentioned in Capture, it learns very quickly. You have this advantage of it being kind of born in the cloud, and the idea that, again, it's contextual based. It's seen almost every variation of invoice across the different customer nodes, and all of that machine learning is extended to you as a new customer. And so it's just a great little opportunity to, you know, make a huge difference on a very important business process internally, I would say.
Great. Can you walk us through how Medius integrates with Infor CSD? Oh, and I like this part, and where NSA fits into that picture.
Yeah. So Medius has, there's a whole API infrastructure, essentially web services to get data in and out, like back and forth between Infor and Medius. And so they think REST APIs, things of this nature. And so from our point of view, there's master data, so things like chart of account information, you know, purchase, you could call it all master data at the end of the day. Purchase order information, goods receipts. So that's kind of one aspect. The people, kind of roles, the approval limits, things of that nature. Chart of accounts, I think I mentioned. And then, of course, the invoice documents flowing back down. And then again, depending on your payment configuration, you know, it's pulling payments in or just the payment details in. So NSA has pre-built connectors that leverage the API libraries of Medius that are also then connected on the other side to Infor CSD. So that work of understanding Infor and how it likes to natively consume and extract information, all the underlying tables and structures, so that's done. And then they do the work to then connect to the Medius API component. So that work is essentially pre-done. So it's a beautiful thing. De-risks the entire project.
Fantastic. Last question. Oh, looks like we have another one sliding in here. So what would you say the time frame has been in implementation in large volume business? How do you go about process updates internally, assuming that the PO matching invoice needs to come from an internal process with correct setup? Little follow-up. An area I find a lot of opportunity in is the buyers setting up POs correctly. Would this cause a high volume of exceptions?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm going to carve this out into two parts. One is the technical implementation time frame. And let's assume you're a huge company, you know, one entity running Infor, you know, multiple, let's call it company codes, whatever. You could technically integrate, if I'm in Vegas, I'd say 8 weeks plus or minus. Like standard, like we'll often talk like 3 months period, but given NSA's work in this, the nature of pre-built, I've seen customers go live in as quickly, you know, 8 weeks or faster is one answer to that question. So that's the technical implementation. But you have maybe nuances and custom fields and whatnot. So let's say 3 months to be very conservative. Then the other thing is, and this is an interesting question, the learning. It's like, okay, let's say your master data is bad or your POs are structured differently, right? You have this aging material master and, you know, suppliers are sending you invoices and they rev the part 5 times. The unit of measures are all different. Medius will essentially recognize those exceptions more quickly and make you more acutely aware of them more quickly, and also make it easier to identify and resolve those things. So I would say it creates an opportunity to, one, free up more time to maybe get at some of the root cause challenges that you have, because it is easier to identify, it's easier to resolve, and just the visibility into the nature is different. So it's going to expose the weaknesses in the current business process, and at the same time, I'd say give you time to then make those fundamental corrective actions to the underlying master data so you can avoid those things from happening going forward, I would say. So I'd say it's almost like a self-clean. It's almost like a little robot vacuum in that sense. It's going to kind of force clean the house for you. Force some discipline, let's say.
Okay, I think we have time for one more here. How do you handle the vendor's product number is not set up correctly in CSD?
Yeah, good question. That kind of goes back to the other one. So let's say the product numbers are different. So There's kind of a fallback in the way matching works. So, and I'm going to get a little complicated here. So ideally, we match in a deterministic way, meaning we're using the numerical data. And let's say hypothetically, like in unit, let's say you bought 12 eaches and the supplier ships you a box of 12, a single box of 12. As long as that invoice line mathematically ties out. So let's say the box of 12 was the same as your extended price for 12 eaches. Mathematically, it's going to be fine and it will make that connection accurately. Okay. So it doesn't matter if the item numbers are actually different. Now, where that deterministic logic breaks down is if you have, say, two line items that are mathematically the same in terms of, say, the extended price for the item. And that's where LLM kind of probabilistic computing comes into play, where we look at those descriptors, things like the item descriptions, the item details, and we try to make a more AI-powered educated guess as to what the invoice line is referencing. But my point is, you actually don't have to have the item numbers be identical in order for that match to occur. Now, that being said, if your objective, if the nature of the question is, how do I identify where I have gaps in what the supplier is sending me versus my material master, this is where analytics comes in and the power of line level detail that Medius enables, because you have now all this line level detail at your disposal. You can create and connect to any BI platform with Medius data and see all the line records where the invoice lines didn't match the, say, the order, say, your material number line or whatever the description. So you can kind of start to clean and identify where you have maybe aging material master items, kind of an analytic perspective, if that makes sense. Hopefully that made sense to you.
Well, that's great. That's fantastic, Don. Thank you. And everyone, I appreciate that engagement. With that, I think what we'll do is move towards taking a look at the great assessment offer that you have, and I'll have you take us through that if you could, Don.
Yeah, so this is an offer, and highly encourage you to take advantage of it. So it's essentially a business assessment. So we'll walk through some of the operational profile numbers of your business process today. So look at things like, where do you operate? Do you have just one instance of Infor? Do you have multiple? What countries do you operate in? How many people do you have? All the stuff, right? The spend. And we will generate like an initial point of view on the value proposition, and then we'll collectively look through and turn levers like value levers on or off based on kind of your core objectives, how you see things, to come up with a value point of view that is unique to you and one that you would be comfortable sharing with leadership inside of your organization. Like, hey, these are kind of Vegas, we got the over under right on these numbers. And we think this is a rational point of view on what this project can mean. We'll also identify some of the qualitative situational things that are happening in your environment that might be preventing you from being better customers to your supplier, or what are some of the internal people pains that people have to deal with. So all of this will be documented, built out, and then you'll have essentially an executive facing set of slide materials that you can always have, whether you want to use it now or you have in your back pocket for, say, a future project initiative, to then say, hey, look, here's what this project can mean from a dollars and cents standpoint. You have budgetary dollars at end of a quarter, end of year. Hey, let's put this IT project in front of others and see how it stands up. So I think, that's pretty much the offer. And it's a pretty compelling consulting engagement. You can coordinate through Morgan here. So if you have interest in this, send Morgan an email, and we will coordinate time to get with you and start this iterative process.
Fantastic. Well, as we bring our webinar to a close today, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us. Thank you for your engagement. I'd like to thank you, Don and Medius, for your presentation. Both Don and myself remain available too with our contact information if you need to have further questions, but do direct your interest in the impact assessment offer to Morgan on your screen right now. With that said, everyone on this presentation will receive a copy of the recording for this, and any attendees that haven't been able to make it will as well. So I'm going to say that's a wrap, and I'll thank you all again, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.